Om Jnanatirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Pranams to all the assembled Vaishnavas and sincere seekers. We are continuing with our Friday Bhagavad Gita session study. We're in chapter 4. We've come to verse 16. And this chapter 4 is very rich. Chapter 4 is titled Jnana Yoga. So it's emphasizing on the teachings of Jnana Yoga, the path of knowledge, the yoga of knowledge. And it's very rich with key verses of Bhagavad Gita. Last week, we went through one verse, which is quite famous, is Yeyatamam Prapadyante, verse 11. Yeyatamam Prapadyante Tams Tataiva Bhajamyaham Mama Vart Manuvartante Manusha Parta Sarvashaha. As Krishna is saying, as you approach me, I will approach you, right? Simply put, whatever you want, I will give that to you, right? Whatever it is that you want to believe, you want to achieve, I will give you that. I will reciprocate with you. According to the reality that you choose to believe in, I will reveal that to you. And whatever level of a relationship you want with me, even if that means to not believe in me at one end of the spectrum, or to be madly in love with me at the other end of the spectrum, whatever it is that you want, I will show that to you. I will engage with you in that way. So that element of free will, right? That's very key here. So we've come to this verse 16. Kim karma, kim akarmeti. And this verse gives us some relief because sometimes persons will have questions like, how does karma exactly work, right? Like, what happens in this scenario or that scenario, or what if you get involved with this person or that person? Like, it's not so black and white, right? Because karma is a complex web, right? That's involving our activity over many lifetimes. Karma also, as will be explained here, karma also doesn't just depend on the action, but it depends on the intention behind the action, right? And that word karma itself originally just means action, right? But then it has this acquired meaning of also meaning the reactions to your action, right? So in a way, it's like a very succinct and efficient use of language. This is Sanskrit. So that same word, it's very intelligent actually, because that one word, karma, it's being used to assume that it's also including reactions, right? If you're doing something, it's automatically entailing an equal and opposite reaction, right? And so in the Sanskrit language, it's just one word, karma. And so in the English language, we use it generally to mean the reactions to our actions, but in Sanskrit, it means both. And originally just means action. But then there is the implication that, strictly speaking, the word karma has the implication of an action that is motivated by some individual desire, selfish desire, to speak more bluntly and a little harshly, perhaps. And it's an action that is motivated by our own egoistic center. That is karma. And because it's, in a sense, a projection upon the environment, because its impetus is coming from our own plane of ego, then it's in friction with the organic whole, and it incurs a reaction, right? So instead of going with the stream, moving with the harmony, moving in consonance with the ecosystem, you're doing something outside of the ecosystem for your own self. And so because of that, there has to be a reaction to that, because it's in friction to the natural flow of things. So that is succinctly what is karma in the Vedic conception, what is action in the Vedic conception. So it gets complicated, right? Because what does this mean? This means two people could do exactly the same thing, but depending on where their intention is, the reactions could be completely different, or there may not be any reaction at all if the intention behind the action was completely selfless, right? So it gets complicated, right? And then there's also the issue of when you get your karma mixed up with someone else's karma, like how is that going to play out? So it gets very complicated. And so I love that about this verse. Like Krishna's just acknowledging that, like it's complicated. Kim karma, what is karma? Kim akarmeti, what is akarma? Akarma means the A is negating it. So akarma means what is non-karma, right? In other words, what is action that doesn't incur reaction, right? That's coming from a selfless place. What does that mean? Kavayo pyatra mohita. Even kavayo is referring to learned people. Mohita means bewilderment. So even learned persons, they can be bewildered in trying to understand this. You know, it's complicated. So anyhow, I think I'm jumping ahead a little. Can we hear Srila Gurudev, Nanda Krishna Prabhu? Maybe we can play around 10 verses from 16, if you have it still on that place.
No, I lost our place.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. You just jump ahead a little bit. We can find it. Yeah, you can play from there. Okay. My copy here.
तमादु प्रस्तवानिति श्री भगवान वाच बहूनि मे व्यतीतानि जन्मानि तव चार्जुन तानहं वेद सर्वाणि नक्तं वेत्थ परन्तप अयोपि सन्नव्ययात्मा भूतानामीश्वरोऽपि सन् प्रकृतिं स्वामधिष्ठाय साधूनां विनाशाय च दुष्कृतान् धर्म संस्थापनार्थाय संभवामि युगे युगे देहं पुनर्जन्म नैति मामेति सोऽर्जुन वीतराग भय क्रोध मनमया.
That's fine. You can play from there. Maybe take us back to the Bhagavad Gita text.
उपाश्रिताः
We're at verse 10.
बहवो ज्ञानतपसा पूजा मद्भावमागताः ये यथा मां प्रपद्यन्ते तांस्तथैव भजाम्यहम् मम वर्त्मानुवर्तन्ते मनुष्यापास सर्वथा काङ्क्षन्तः कर्मणां सिद्धिं यजन्त इह देवताः क्षिप्रं हि मानुषे लोके सिद्धिर्भवति कर्मजा चातुर्वर्ण्यं मया सृष्टं गुणकर्म विभागशः तस्य कर्तारमभिमां विद्ध कर्तारमभयं न मां कर्माणि लिप्यन्ति न मे कर्म फले स्पृहा इति मां जोऽभिजानाति कर्मभिर्न सबध्यते एवं ज्ञात्वा कृतं कर्म पूर्वैरपि मुमुक्षुभिः कुरु कर्मैव तस्मात् त्वं पूर्वैः पूर्वतरं कृतम् किं कर्म किं अकर्मेति कवयोत्पत्र मोहिता तत्ते कर्म प्रवक्ष्यामि यज्ञत्वा मक्षसि शुभात् कर्मणोच्छ विबुद्धव्यं बद्धव्यं च विकर्मणः अकर्मणश्च बुद्धव्यं गहना कर्मणो गतिः कर्मण्यकर्मजः पश्येत् अकर्मणि च कर्मजः स बुद्धिमान् मनुष्येषु स युक्तः कृष्णकर्म कृत् यस्य सर्वे समारम्भा काम संकल्प वर्जिता ज्ञानाग्नि दग्ध कर्माणम तमाहु पंडितं बुधा तक्ता कर्म फलासंगं नित्य तृप्तो निराश्रया कर्मण्यभिप्रवृत्तोऽपि नैव किंचित करोति सा निराशीर्यत चित्तात्मा तक्त सर्व परिग्रह शारीरं केवलं कर्म कुर्वन् आपनोति किल्बिषम्.
Okay, so we went up to verse 21. Good. 16 to 21. Okay, so here we are at verse 16. We can chant this together. Kim karma karmeti kavayo pyachamohitaha tatte karma pravakshami yajyatva moksha se shubhat. What is action? What is inaction? Kim karma, kim akarmeti. Even the learned have difficulty understanding this. Kavayo pyachamohitaha. Hence I shall enlighten you in this matter, knowing which you will be liberated from inauspiciousness. Karmano yapi bodhavyam cha vikarmanaha, akarmanascha bodhavyam gahana karmano gativi. The true nature of action is difficult to comprehend. One should understand prescribed action, prohibited action, and inaction. So, few terms here we can maybe look at. There's karma, right, as we just discussed, means action. And then it also mentions vikarma. And that V is a prefix, which is used in different ways. In this context, as vikarma is making it negative. So vikarma means sinful action, action that has a negative result because it was something that was harmful to the environment. And then the third type of karma mentioned here is akarma, which means no karma, inaction, which doesn't necessarily mean just sitting and doing nothing, as we mentioned earlier, but may mean that one is actually engaged in action, but because their inner intention is fully selfless, they're not incurring any reaction to their action. So those are some terms which are helpful. Karma, vikarma, akarma. Then to verse 18. Karmanya karmaya pashyad akarmani cha karmaya sabuddhiman manusheshu sayukta kritsna karma krit. One who sees action with an inaction and inaction with an action is wise among men. He is a yogi and a performer of all actions. And it sounds like a bit of a puzzle, doesn't it? You know, who sees action with an inaction and inaction with an action. But actually the meaning is simple. That means that one who has real vision, right? They can see that someone may be artificially restraining themselves from certain actions, but they're actually full of selfish desire. And on the other hand, someone who may be very active, they're actually acting from a very selfless place. And so there's no action there, actually. There's no karma that's being incurred. But it takes someone with higher vision to be able to see something like this, right? And we could say Paramahamsa, right? A Paramahamsa, they're able to see the true essence of everything that is going on, everything that is in front of them. You know, they're able to see the true essence of what that is. And we were blessed to have the association of Srila Govinda Maharaj because he was someone who really had, you know, that type of vision, you know, and sometimes it could surprise us, you know, that persons who seemed, you know, very ordinary or somewhat materialistic, you know, our Gurudev might give them much attention and honor. And on the other hand, someone posing as some type of renunciate or spiritualist, but actually something else is going on inside, our Gurudev might disregard them. So it was very interesting, very instructive to observe, how he related with different persons and how he was able to see things that we often could not see. He was able to penetrate and see the core, right? He was able to penetrate the superficial layers of our apparent personality and nature and see to the core of one's being. So that was something quite wonderful to be able to experience and witness in the person of Srila Govinda Maharaj. So verse 19. Yasya sarve samarambha kama sankapha varjitaha yanagni dagda kanamanam tamahu panditam buddhaha. One whose every action is without fruitive desire. So this is that selfless action, right, that we were referring to. And this is karma yoga. And also we can say it's the basis of all yoga, right? Because we can also remember each of the yogas are building upon the other yogas. And so karma yoga is not only karma yoga is the foundation of all the yogas. Also including bhakti yoga. There's karma yoga within bhakti yoga. Karma yoga, from one perspective, you could say, is undeveloped bhakti yoga. All yoga reaches its perfection in bhakti yoga, right? And we can remember that explanation of Bhakti Vinod Thakur, right, where he uses this phrase of buddhi yoga. Buddhi yoga is also referred to throughout Bhagavad Gita. Sometimes not so explicitly, like you won't always see it in the translations, but when you look in the Sanskrit verse, you see it being referred to there, this buddhi yoga. And so Bhakti Vinod Thakur describes this buddhi yoga as being more or less synonymous with bhakti yoga, and it represents yoga as one path, right? One path that has different stages of development. And so he describes, so karma yoga is one step on the ladder of buddhi yoga, right? And then full buddhi yoga, when you get to the top of the ladder, that is bhakti yoga, right? So all of these elements that you find in karma yoga, jnana yoga, they reach their perfection. They're also present within bhakti yoga. They find their end in bhakti yoga. So whose every action is without fruitive desire, right? Whose every action is performed without any individual purpose in mind, without expecting any result, and who burns all actions in the fire of knowledge, right? That's an interesting phrase. Who burns all actions in the fire of knowledge. So it sounds very poetic, right? What does it mean? It means that because one is performing their action with spiritual knowledge, they're not incurring any reaction, right? So in a sense, it's being burned. Any type of reaction that might have come from their action, whether apparently good or bad, it's not incurring any reaction because they're doing it with this consciousness of with this spiritual awareness and spiritual knowledge. And so they're not bringing any reaction to what they're doing. Welcome, Jagannath Priya. Great to have you with us today. So this person is described by the wise as learned. So it's a wonderful meditation, isn't it? Especially at the start of our day, to meditate on what it is that we are doing, what are our duties in this day, what is the intention that we're setting behind our actions individually and collectively throughout that day, and to try to cultivate this spirit of duty and selflessness. And then from the perspective of bhakti yoga, we can add the bonus aspect of trying to make it an offering, right? And that's actually easier. That actually comes more naturally, right? To think of doing something without wanting anything in return, or to think of doing something without having any vested interest in it, it's actually quite difficult. It's a little unnatural. But if we think of making it an offering, that becomes something positive, right? Because not doing something is a negative thing, right? That I'm going to do this without any selfishness. That's actually a negative. That's like a prohibition, which is helpful to some extent, but it's also somewhat unnatural. But then if we think of making it an offering, that becomes something beautiful and very natural. Let what I do today become an offering to Krishna, to Guru and Vaishnava. Let it be an offering to them. Then it becomes something positive and joyful. So this is the beauty of the Vaishnava conception and Bhakti Yoga. So verse 20, Tyaktva karma phala sangam nitya chitto nirashayaha karmanya pravitopi naiva kinchit karoti saha. Such a person giving up attachment to the fruits of action, fully content in the eternal bliss within, and free from mundane dependence, though fully active, does nothing at all. I'm going to read that one more time. Such a person giving up attachment to the fruits of action, fully content in the eternal bliss within, and free from mundane dependence, though fully active, does nothing at all. Nitya tripto nirashayaha. This tripto is referring to this inner satisfaction, this contentment within. Nirashayaha. Interesting. Nirashai. Ashrai is referring to shelter. So nirashai here is saying like no shelter, but meaning in the sense of not taking shelter of something mundane. So as it's put here, free from mundane dependence. And nitya chipto. See, this is the thing, that there's actually so much sweetness within, right? We're seeking that on the outside, but the advice here is look for that within. You don't need to find your fulfillment in this flow of action and reaction in this worldly plane, but real satisfaction, that is within. And ultimately, that is in connection with the Lord, in our relationship with the Lord. So this person, they may be fully active in the world, but in terms of consciousness, they're not active at all. They're not engaging. They're not projecting expectations on the environment. That's another way of putting it. They're not projecting expectations. They're carrying out their duty, and their only expectation is for the inner world, for their inner world, the inner world of spirit and higher connection. That is more than enough. That is connecting with the infinite. If you are satisfied, if you are feeling just a drop of that inner world, then that is infinite. What more could you need? Verse 21. Nidashir yata chitatma tyaktva sarva parigraha shariram kevalam karma purvanapnoti kilbisham. Desireless, controlling mind and body by the intelligence, and renouncing all possessiveness and acquisition, no sinful or pious reaction is incurred by such a person, who may act to acquire mundane objects merely for his bodily sustenance. So this is the ideal life of a practitioner in this world, right? That we are taking from this world what we need, right? For, as it's put here, for bodily sustenance. Shadiram kevalam. Only for what the shadir is referring to the body. So whatever it is that we need to maintain this body is like an instrument or vehicle that we need to navigate this world. And so we take what we need. We take what we need. Not more, not less. This is also called sometimes yukta vairagya. Means properly adjusted renunciation. We don't reject the environment. We don't renounce the environment. We also don't want to excessively enjoy the environment, but we take what we need for the sake of upkeep of our own selves. And the thing is, if we take more than we need, then inevitably we will have to face some reaction. I was talking about that with my mother the other day. She's here in Arizona, and we see that, if someone is collecting more energy than they actually need, Mother Nature, she keeps things in check, right? There will be something that will come to make the adjustment, because you're in a sense, you're like breaking the natural order of things. You're breaking the laws of nature if you are excessively collecting for yourself energy in various forms. And so there will have to be some correction, some adjustment, if we're not living in harmony with that order. And so we don't want to take too much. That will not be good for us. On the other hand, we don't want to take too little also, because we actually have this privilege of a human body. This human body is a great opportunity that we can use for the sake of our evolution of consciousness. And so if we do not take care of that body properly, if we don't give it the energy that it needs, then it will fail us and we won't be able to practice our spiritual lives at all, right? So there must be some balance, some happy harmony in our interaction with the environment and how we are caring for ourselves. So this is described here. Does anyone want to make any comments or has a question at this point? Otherwise, we can go back to hearing Gurudev. Welcome, Sadhvi, Tungarasa. Great to have you all here with us.
यदृच्छालाभ संतुष्टो दंडातीतो विमत्सरः समसिद्धा असिद्धौ च कृत्यापि न निबध्यते गतसंगस्य मुक्तस्य ज्ञानावस्थितचेतसः यज्ञायाचरतः कर्म समग्रं प्रविलीयते ब्रह्मात्मनं ब्रह्महविर्ब्रह्माग्नौ ब्रह्मणाहुतं ब्रह्मैव तेन गन्तव्यं ब्रह्मकर्म समाधिना दैवमेवापरे यज्ञं योगिनोपर्युपासते ब्रह्मज्ञावापरे यज्ञं यज्ञेनैवोपजुह्वति श्रोत्रादीनिन्द्रियाण्यान्ये संयमाग्निषु जुह्वति शब्दादीन् विषयानन्न इंद्रियाग्निषु जुह्वति सर्वादीन्।
Okay, so here we are in verse 22. Yajichalabha santushto dvandvatito vimatsaraha samasiddhavasiddhocha hitvapina nibhadyate. Content with whatever is readily available and unaffected by dualities of pleasure and pain, attraction and aversion. Such a person has no envy. He is equipoised, neither elated nor dejected in success or failure. Though active, he is not bound by any action. How beautiful, huh? What a beautiful way to live. And this is a true yogi, one who can live in this way, maintain this type of equipoise and focus in the midst of the changing duality of this worldly plane. content with whatever is readily available. There's so much in that, isn't there? Especially in Jai Changarasa, Jai Shri Gurudev, Jai Bhaktavinda. Content with whatever is readily available. How wonderful, you know. And especially in this age of convenience and technology, we're really, you know, that way of living is really challenged, right? Because we have such easy access to everything that we might whimsically want, you know, in any momentary desire, any momentary whim that may just cross our mind, we can obtain with just the click of a button, right? We can order anything from almost any country in the world, almost, apart from a few, you know, like North Korea, perhaps one or two others, you know. We can order like anything we want, you know, and that, you know, that applies to food, that applies to technology, that applies to, you know, beauty projects and clothing and household items. Like, I mean, it's actually a type of madness, you know, that we can do that, and often for very cheap prices, you know. Any whim that we have, you know, actually we're all living like queens and kings in this age, you know, that even someone who doesn't earn very much, you know, they can live almost like royalty, you know. And it, oh, I'm looking at this poster. I'm in the tiny home of Anu Krishna here. There's a poster here, absurda, some Latin expression, absurd, it's absurd. And so it's actually, you know, it becomes very distracting. That's what I want to say, right? It becomes very distracting. In previous times, you know, you might long for various things, and many things that we take for granted nowadays, even like, you know, salt and sugar. You know, salt used to be used like money in some civilizations because it's considered so precious and valuable. Sugar was something that only the very wealthy could have, you know, for a long period of time. So again, like all these things we take for granted, you know, actually in previous ages were very difficult. Previous times were very difficult to get. So it can become a distraction, right? Because we can so easily get all of these things. And it's not like we're living in the forest and we're like collecting water from the stream, you know, and we just have what we're growing in our garden, right? And it's easy to, you know, practice detachment when that's all that you have, right? So in another sense, it's a good opportunity to really practice, you know, spiritual life, because we have everything in front of us, or everything at the tip of our fingers. But to stay focused in the midst of that counts for something, right? So what can I say except this is a beautiful meditation. Labha yad jicha labha santushto. You know, whatever one can easily get, you know, to be santushto, santosh, to be satisfied with that, to be content with that. That is a wonderful meditation to pervade our daily lives. Content with whatever is readily available and unaffected by dualities of pleasure and pain, attraction and aversion. And we're going through that all the time, moment by moment. It gets exhausting, actually, you know. It gets exhausting within our own selves to see how we engage with the environment like this. Oh, I don't like this. This is disturbing me. Oh, I like this. This is nice. Like always moving back and forth in this binary way. It gets exhausting. Oh, this person said this to me, I'm down. Oh, this person said that to me, I'm happy, I'm up. No, it gets tiring. So to be able to attain this state of equipoise is very valuable. Very valuable. We will save so much energy, actually, We will save so much energy that we can use for something more meaningful. Right? And such a person has no envy. Has no envy. This is another thing that is always causing us trouble. Right? That whether it's subtle or more apparent within us, we want to put ourselves in the center. You know, we want to be more important in one way or another than those around us. In one way or another, we need to have the position of central importance. And that may be something that is very subtle within us. We may not be even so aware of that, right? It may come out in unexpected ways, right? But it is the foundation of our existence in this material world and the foundation of our position as being situated in aversion to the Lord. Vimukha. Sometimes it's described like that in Sanskrit in the scriptures. Vimukha, or sometimes Bahir Mukha, means literally Mukha's face, means like face turned away from the Lord. Because the fundamental issue is that we don't celebrate the fact that there's a higher center than ourselves, and that we live in a Krishna-centric world, not an I-centric world. So it's a subtle thing within us that we can try to be aware of. And what is the other side of envy? What is the positive, the opposite and positive expression of envy? Appreciation, right? This is one marker by which we can identify whether we're making progress or not. That we can appreciate others, that we can celebrate others being better than ourselves. And the great Vaishnavas, we can be shocked actually by how much they're happy to appreciate others, to celebrate others and their qualities. It makes for such a beautiful and happy atmosphere. You know, when we have the privilege to be in the association of such a Vaishnava, we see they have so much spaciousness within them, so much space within them, where there's room for everyone to be wonderful, for everyone to be beautiful, for everyone to be glorious. It makes for such a positive atmosphere. And that is, you know, that's something our Gurudev Srila Govinda Maharaj spoke of many times. That this is actually the fundamental quality of a Vaishnava. And this is also mentioned in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Nirmatsar, right? Those who are free from envy. And that is how, and how do you identify it? By this quality of being able to celebrate others, to appreciate others, to glorify others. Those who are suffering from envy, they're not able to glorify others because they want to keep that for themselves. They don't want to appreciate the qualities of others. So that's an important one to meditate upon. So such a person has no envy. He is equipoised, neither elated nor dejected in success or failure. Though active, he is not bound by any action. And this nature of enviousness, which again, may be very subtle within us, it's also something that is exhausting, right? For example, this is one way it can play out. Like if we don't get the acknowledgement that we wanted, right? Or let's say we did something and the praise went to somebody else, right? The credit went to somebody else, right? Or we feel someone has not represented our position as we feel it should have been. It actually becomes kind of exhausting. That we're always reacting in this way to the environment, different things that occur in our daily lives. That also gets tiring. There's a loss of energy that comes because of that. It's kind of like this chip on our shoulders, like this complex that we have, that we need to have the attention, the acknowledgement that we want. Otherwise we are dissatisfied. We've got this like void within us, this hole within us, and we need this type of attention. So another very nice meditation here. So going on to verse 23. Gatta sangasya muktasya jnanavasti tacheta saha yagyaya charata karma samagram praviliyate. For one who is detached, enlightened, and liberated, all his actions performed in the spirit of sacrifice are perfectly dissipated. So this is a similar expression to what we heard in a little few verses up, right? That one who acts without selfish intent, everything that they do, it is burned in the fire of knowledge, right? Meaning that they're not incurring any reactions because they're acting in this awareness of spiritual principles. So that's what's being stated here, that they're not, that any type of reaction that might come, that is being released. They are released from that because of their pure inner intention. But there is a commentary here, which is perhaps not so relevant to ourselves, but we can read it. And so this is addressing some conception of another school of thought. Commentary: the actions of one practicing the yoga of selfless action do not lead to apurva, as considered by the philosophers known as karma mimamsaka. According to their ethical yet atheistic ideology, the karma mimamsakas, or mundane rationalists, claim that pious actions produce an unseen, subtle potency known as apurva, which must fructify at the appropriate time after death. Can you scroll down a little bit, Ananta Krishna? Which must fructify at the appropriate time after death. Their conception that this fruit can later be shared by others is meant to show the eternality of karma or action, but it ignores the presence of the supreme autocrat. So this karma mimamsa, right? This is a branch of philosophy in Vedic India, and they believe that karma is everything, right? Don't exactly believe in God or higher being who's like managing the system, but that karma is kind of like a law of its own, a law of nature. That's like the most powerful regulating force in existence. And it's all just carrying on. It's all moving on automatically. And everything is controlled by this law of karma. And, funnily enough, it's mentioned in the purports of our gurus that, in the Govardhan Leela, right, when Krishna lifts the Govardhan hill with the pinky of his left hand, it's meant to explain that when Krishna goes to convince the Brajabasis not to do their worship to Lord Indra, as they normally do every year, the basis of his argument is this karma mimamsa. Because he's saying to them, why do you need to bother with this Lord Indra? Like, who cares about him? Karma is everything. Everything's happening by the law of karma. So our direct concern is with this Govardhan hill. Govardhan hill is the one who's supplying us with everything we need. So we should just worship Govardhan. This Lord Indra has nothing to do with it. He's just, taking some free benefits that he hasn't really earned. Forget about him. Forget about the gods. Let's just directly worship Govardhan hill, and we will invite good karma by doing that. So that's actually Krishna's argument, which is funny, because it's kind of like an atheistic argument. But of course, his higher intention behind that, his real intention, is to bring everything to the center, which is himself, right? Rather than worshiping the secondary devas, the gods, who are all actually empowered by the center, just directly approach me. Make your concern the center, which is myself. And ultimately, this Govardhan Hill, of course, is a form of Krishna. So this was like his his master plan, But originally he's promoting this karma mimamsa conception, which is quite funny. Okay, so going back to the commentary. So the statement of Sri Krishna, samagram praviliyate, all actions are dissipated, ought not to be misinterpreted to mean that the actions of liberated souls cause some such remote worldly consequence or apurva. Rather, the Lord indicates that the actions offered to him by the selfless karma yogi do not cause any subsequent reaction to be either enjoyed or suffered by others in this mundane plane. So we can go down there. So now we've come to verse 24. So, one thing that we can mention at this time, is that, Bhagavad Gita, it does have, different lessons for different levels of practitioners, right? And this is why Bhagavad Gita is so popular and has been so popular, since forever, because it's so broad and so universal. And so there is literally something for everyone in Bhagavad Gita. And so generally, we can apply the verses of Bhagavad Gita in connection with principles of devotion. Many of the verses have this more broader connotation, but then some of them are not exactly relevant, right? Some of them are more aligned with other particular yogas and not exactly applicable to bhakti yoga. And so there's a few verses now we're coming to which are in that line. And this one we've come to now, verse 24, I've heard it's quite a well-known verse and often used verse amongst those in the aligns with the Brahman conception, right? The impersonal aspect of the absolute. And I've heard that and our Gurudev mentioned this, and then there were others. And Ganga Leela, she also told me about this. She couldn't make it today, but she also confirmed this. Like in traditional yoga ashrams, they often chant this prayer, and I've heard particularly when they're going to take their meals, they chant this. Seeing everything as an offering to Brahman. Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavir, Brahmagno, Brahmanahutam, Brahmaivatena Gantavyam, Brahmakarma Samadhina. The ladle is Brahma, the oblation is Brahma, offered by Brahma into the fire of Brahma. One whose consciousness is fully absorbed in Brahma, action certainly attains to Brahma, the absolute. So everything is Brahma, right? Coming from, for, to, and so on. Everything is Brahma. But we could also actually apply this, interpret this in a Vaishnava way. If you replace Brahma with Krishna or Bhagavan, because ultimately Brahma is just one manifestation of Bhagavan, of the personality of Godhead. So we could actually see it in that way, that everything is from Krishna, for Krishna, to Krishna, and so on. And the only difference is that rather than there being this like kind of vague, non-differentiated, hazy existence, there's a dynamic, variegated existence. Right. And I always like that example of the forest, right? That from a distance, that forest just looks like a blob of green, the sheet of green, just oneness, a type of oneness. But when you come in closer, you go in, you find there's millions of species, millions of life forms, all very active and busy. And there's uncountable relationships going on and interactions going on and life and beauty and color and all of this and dynamic movement. So it's like that. Actually, these people are looking at the same thing, but they're just a bit further away. So they're seeing as this plane of oneness. But if you actually get there and go inside, fine, there's a lot going on and a lot of personality. So it's like that. There's also a type of merging that will take place from the Vaishnava conception, but it's a dynamic merging where you don't lose your individuality. Right? So we can also see that verse in that way. Okay, verse 25. Daivam me vapade yagnam yogina paripasate Ramagna vapade yagyam yagyanaivo prajuvati. And then to Krishna, can you scroll down there? Some yogis offer sacrifices to the demigods, and others offer the self into the fire of Brahma by vibrating the pranava mantra, Om. So now we are discussing some specific practices which yogis will perform. 26. Shodadinindriyanyanye samyagna. Difficult one here. Shodadinindriyanyanye samyamagni sujuvati shabdadam vishayandanya indriyagni sujuvati. Some offer their senses of hearing, touching, seeing, tasting, and smelling into the fires of self-control. Yet others offer the sense objects of sound, touch, form, taste, and smell into the fire of the senses. This word juvati is so beautiful. I mean, it's referring to offering, to offer. And Janardhan Maharaj gave that name to one of his disciples in China, juvati. Very, very beautiful word and beautiful meaning also. So again, some specific practices that the yogis will carry out. And is that the verse that we ended on?
Believe so. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, perhaps we can stop there for today. Then I think we have a lot to meditate on in the verses that we've been through. It's always very purifying going through the verses of Bhagavad Gita. I always think of it as taking a bath, bathing our consciousness. Well, does anyone want to bring up any points or comment or question or anything at all? Should we close there for today? Okay, then we can stop there. So we're on the journey in Bhagavad Gita, and this chapter 4, it is focusing on Jnana Yoga, of course. And so as I mentioned, right, some of these verses are more widely applicable, transferable to the practice of bhakti. Then a few of them, like these last couple we went through, are a little more specific, but it's also inspiring, right? Everything in Bhagavad Gita is here to uplift us and to help the souls of this world to raise themselves up, right? From lower consciousness to higher consciousness. And so we get some inspiration from everything that we find in Bhagavad Gita. Okay, well then we'll stop there for today. Thank you all for your good company. Very grateful for that always. Panchakalpa Tirubhyascha Nipa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Bhakti Sandar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. All the assembled Vaishnavas ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Hari Bol. See you all next time. Okay.